Good evening, everybody. I'm Carlos Quesada. I'm CEO of the Epilepsy Foundation of Northern California. Welcome to this educational webinar. I have Erika Roach, which is a PhD student from the clinical science at UC Berkeley. We are so lucky to have her support in this webinar. And as we all know, there is some challenges and serious challenges that come with living with a hidden disability like epilepsy. And hopefully she can give us a little bit of information or some advice on how to cope with some of those challenges. Especially has been especially difficult during the COVID era, the last few years. Hopefully we are just at the end of that and we are able to fight the isolation that we have lived for a while. So any advice or any information you can share with us, we're really welcome it, and we thank you for being here and supporting us.
Thank you for that introduction, Carlos, and good evening, everyone who's joining. Okay, I'll share my screen here. I've got some slides to share. Okay, can everyone see this all right? Wonderful. So today we're going to be talking a bit about depression and anxiety. I'll give you just a brief introduction of what depression and anxiety are, what they look like, right? Because they can be there. It's very common, and we're starting to learn more about depression and anxiety as a society, but there's a lot that's misunderstood as well. And we'll talk about it in the context of epilepsy. And then I also want to talk with you about cognitive behavioral therapy and some skills that are really core to CBT that may be helpful. So this is, oh, I see a chat. Oh, yes, please. If you have questions, I'll be asking you questions too. So please feel free to pop your responses in the chat and make this engaging and interactive. And thank you, Carlos, for monitoring those questions for me. This book might be a helpful resource for folks. Patty, she herself has very resiliently dealt with the challenges of having grand mal seizures, and Dr. Nancy Liu, the director of the clinic at UC Berkeley, actually had a chance to speak with Patty and learn a bit about her story. And so in her book, she talks about how some skills related to CBT actually have been helpful for her on her journey. So this might be of interest to folks. The four-letter word is fear. And on that note, this workbook called Taking Control of Your Seizures may also be a helpful resource. I'll actually be pulling some things from this workbook. And again, you'll see that a lot of these concepts are also very well aligned with some core CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy principles. And they say often the fear of having a seizure does more harm than the seizures themselves. So we really want to talk about that fear when we talk about how to address mental health in the context of seizures. It's very relevant. And the vast majority of people with seizures are able to lead full and active lives. So that's a really core component. And again, this book has exercises that people can work with a seizure counselor and therapist to help manage some of that fear. So as I mentioned, our agenda today is to go over what is depression and anxiety and what's CBT. So first, depression, anxiety, and I'm sure a lot of folks on this call are familiar with depression and anxiety and may even have personal experiences with it. So I want to acknowledge that and acknowledge that it can be, some of these things may be known by you already. First, depression and anxiety are often comorbid. They often come together in about 85% of cases, actually. 20 to 50% of individuals with epilepsy report having or experiencing depression and anxiety. So it's quite common in the general population, and it's also quite common in individuals with epilepsy. And this is due to a few things, or it can be due to a variety of factors, but some contributors are the fact that some brain areas responsible for certain types of seizures also affect mood and can lead to depression. And the relationship can go both ways, actually, because people with depression are also more likely to have an epileptic seizure or to have epilepsy. And seizure medications can also affect mood. So depressive symptoms can be a side effect of seizure medication. And then, of course, the challenges of living with a hidden disability like epilepsy can also affect your mood. So there are a few reasons why we might see this 20 to 50% rate. And also apologies for the font being a little tiny. If you're like me, I like bigger print, so the formatting got a little distorted. It's also the leading cause of disability in the world, according to the World Health Organization. Okay, and it's common across countries, including low-income countries, and it's estimated that depression will become the third most burdensome health problem in the world after HIV/AIDS and perinatal conditions. Okay, so depression and anxiety, I share some of these facts just to give you overall sense of the prevalence and how common depression and anxiety are around the world. Okay, and for a while, depression and anxiety were pretty stigmatized. To talk about mental health in general has had a history of being stigmatized in our discussions. Fortunately, we're seeing this trend in a positive direction where even celebrities are talking about their own mental health struggles. They're chronicling it in their lyrics, in their interviews. And so you see here, even The Rock. So no matter how rich, famous, successful, beautiful, talented you are, you can't buy your way out of depression, anxiety. It's still, it affects people regardless of your background. And again, the fact that we're having these conversations is really important and I think really promising for us. So these are some common symptoms of depression, and many of these you may be familiar with. But the key thing here is that the duration, they have to be at least the symptoms have to be persisting for at least 2 weeks. It's really characterized by the persistence of these symptoms and its effect on your ability to live your life to its fullest. We all go through periods where, we might be feeling sad about something. We all experience, we may all, feel anxious at times or low energy or have difficulty sleeping, have changes in appetite. That doesn't automatically mean we're depressed. Depression is really characterized by kind of the chronicity or just the persistence of these symptoms and its effect, again, like how debilitating it is. Okay, so I put here that it's these symptoms accompanied by distress or a decline in functioning. This measure of depression is specific for epilepsy, the NDDIE, and it actually looks pretty similar to other measures of depression, but this one is a little more customized for epilepsy. And the GAD-7 stands for the Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7 scale or 7-item scale, is a common measure of anxiety. And people endorse whether they've experienced these problems and how often. Again, it's distress accompanied by distress or decline in functioning. Okay. Well, COVID in particular has been a really difficult time for us, and we've been hearing that, right, for the past couple years. But it's exacerbated an already existing mental health crisis. Pre-COVID, rates of anxiety and depression were already increasing pretty rapidly, and we've seen that really just become more pronounced over the past couple years as people experience, social isolation, economic uncertainty, anxiety about their health and the health of loved ones. There are so many factors at play here that are contributing to this psychological toll. And a lot of people are experiencing anxiety about going back to business as usual, or to going back to interacting with people after being isolated for so long. And so it's continuing, and as things, as we things start to, the outlook starts to look more positive, we may still see some of the ramifications of living with this stress for a couple of years. So we just covered just a brief overview of depression and anxiety, as well as what that looks like, some contributing factors that might be specific for individuals with epilepsy. And now I want to just introduce you to what CBT is and how it can, some core principles of CBT and how it might be helpful for dealing with depression. So I think it's really helpful to think of CBT from a case conceptualization standpoint. There are biological influences to depression, biological influences on depression and anxiety. There are psychological influences, such as the way we think about certain situations, the behaviors we take as a result, social support, and then there are also sociocultural influences that may impact our mood, depression, anxiety, right? And for biological influences, psychotropic medications often address those. Cognitive behavioral therapy is really effective, is a really evidence-based and effective tool for addressing this cognitive component, as well as the behaviors. And then you've got media, public health campaigns, peer support addressing the sociocultural influences. But the cool thing is that all of these things also, they interplay with each other. And so changes in one area may influence the other when we think of the biopsychosocial model of depression and anxiety. Okay, so I like to show this cartoon to illustrate one of the core principles of CBT. Would anyone like to explain in the chat what's going on in the first cartoon, cartoon number 1? I'm actually not able to see. Here we go. I can see it. So what's going on in this first cartoon. Folks, you can type it in the chat. Well, maybe I can pose this question. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Carlos. Okay. What do we see? Well, I'll talk us through the first one, and then maybe someone can share for the next question. So we see someone who's experiencing rain, right? It's raining outside. He's thinking something, and he's covering his head with a book, or they're covering their head with a book. Okay. What do you think they're thinking in that second panel? What do you think they're thinking? Just add it to the chat. Okay, well, some people might say that in this second panel, the person's thinking, okay, just go with it. Don't worry about the rain. Okay. And this one. And Michelle, did you mean for cartoon 1 or cartoon 2? Okay, yes, okay, thank you, Audra and Michelle. Someone who doesn't mind the rain in number 2. Okay, and so what's really critical here is what's happening in this middle square, right, in both. So in the first one, we see this character is clearly sad. They've got this sad or disappointed expression on their face. You might imagine that he's thinking like, oh, it's raining. Oh no, I didn't bring an umbrella. I guess I'll have to, use my book for cover. And maybe thinking other things as he's got this sad face. And in the second panel, this person is also experiencing rain and is maybe thinking like, oh, this is great. We've been in a drought, or great, my garden's going to get some water, or I've always wanted to run in the rain, or I don't mind it, as Audra and Michelle were saying. I don't mind the rain. I actually like the rain. And so we like to use this cartoon just to illustrate the fact that these are two people who are in the same situation, and this middle panel, the thought that they're having about this situation is influencing their behavior, right? And that's a core principle of CBT, actually, that our situation, our thoughts about a situation contribute to our behaviors, which then can influence our emotions, which then can influence our thoughts again. So we can get this cycle going. And you can be in a similar situation as someone else, but if your thoughts are different, like in that cartoon, then the way you behave is likely going to differ, and your subsequent emotions are going to be different. You can have at least two completely different outcomes. Okay, so cognitive behavioral therapy really focuses on identifying negative thought patterns or unhelpful thought patterns and behavioral patterns, and helping people develop the tools to change any maladaptive thoughts or behaviors, and also manage emotions as well. And so there's a big focus on tool building, or tools and skill building in CBT. These are just some examples of thoughts that are common in people who may have a hidden disability, or who are experiencing seizures. These came from different interviews with individuals, and from that workbook as well. But I'm a freak. I'll be a burden to others. Am I going to have a seizure today? I've lost my independence. I'll never be able to live alone. How do we feel after seeing these, after seeing some of these things? Or how would we feel if we were thinking some of these? Maybe folks can just drop one word in the chat, an emotion that you would feel if you were having these thoughts. Yeah, unempowered. Thank you, Monica. Yeah. Yeah. Empowered. What else? How else might we feel? Some other emotions. Hopeless. Yeah. It's kind of sad, right? Bummed. Okay. Oftentimes we find ourselves in this cycle, lost. Thank you. Thank her for contributing that one. Oftentimes if we find ourselves, in this cycle of thinking some of these thoughts, it's like a tape recorder, or just a podcast on repeat, a song on repeat in your head, thinking some of these negative thoughts. And you can find yourself actually filtering out the positive thoughts, so seeing things through this negative filter and ignoring the positive events completely. Examples include, I can't work, so I'm useless. If we lose, it'll be my fault. Nothing good happened to me this week. And you might ask yourself, is it true that there's nothing good that happened in the week, or nothing positive about the situation? Mind reading is another very common negative thought pattern we see, or I should say just a thought pattern we see that can lead to some negative feelings. Mind reading is this act of thinking that you know what others are, or this tendency, I should say, to think that you know what other people are thinking, and that they're thinking negatively about you. So my partner seems very upset today. I must have done something wrong. I didn't get the answer first. My team members must be mad at me. I can't tell others how I feel because they'll think I'm crazy. Okay. And again, you might ask yourself, can you really know what other people are thinking? Most people are focused on their own lives and their own problems. Maybe there are other reasons why they're acting a certain way. And you can encourage yourself to think about some of those possible reasons, right? Because you can see that without intervening on either these negative filters or the mind reading, you can really see how it can lead to this downward spiral. That person, again, the person in that first cartoon may find himself thinking like, oh my gosh, I left my umbrella. Why does this always happen to me? I'm so forgetful. I always leave things behind. Now the stuff that I left outside is going to be ruined, and it's going to be a really dreary day. I won't be able to do all that stuff I wanted to do. And so you can just see how it can really spiral quite quickly, right? And when we open ourselves, when we have or practice some of these skills to see the picture a little more holistically, someone who's in that same situation, experiencing those same obstacles, may have additional thoughts, even if they have some of the negative ones. They may have a thought like, the weather is great today. I'll learn how to find a way. I deserve credit for trying hard. I'll just take it one day at a time, one step at a time. It's going to take time to learn. I'm fighting this. I'm considerate of others. These meds can make me feel depressed. Let me listen to my body. I'm doing the best I can. And how do you feel? How do you think you would feel if you have these thoughts instead, or in addition to? Maybe a little more, was it normal? Fighting a losing battle, someone says. Someone else says normal, might feel more normal. Empowered, encouraged, hopeful, energized. Okay, and so we can see that, you know, these thoughts that you have can lead to different emotions, and those in turn can also, again, influence the thoughts you have, and it repeats. So, oops, thoughts, behaviors. Sorry, my mouth is getting a little sticky here. And social behaviors. So let's just do an example here. Say you've lost $20 and you have this thought, oh my gosh, why am I always losing things? I can't do anything right. A behavior that you might have is that you might say like, okay, I'm not going to go to lunch with my coworker because, you know, like I lost that $20. Now I don't have money to get lunch with that person. And that could be like a social behavior too. I guess it could be a behavior, and that could influence your mood. Or you could have this thought, maybe someone who needed it picked it up. They probably need it more than I do right now. That's one example. Okay, you can also, these are just a few examples of different thoughts. If you're feeling lonely, that's the situation, right? You can have this thought, it's because no one likes me, nothing will ever go right for me. Or you can have the thought, this world can be a lonely place for anyone, but I know that friends are good medicine. Maybe I should reach out to someone. I bet it's been hard for them too. And again, these thoughts will have different impact on your behaviors, likely. And so, referring back to our model, we see how this is working and why CBT is so focused on the thought piece. Okay. Can also have this situation where you wake up feeling anxious about going to meet your friend, and your behavior could be that you stay in bed, go back to sleep, you wake up late, text to cancel at the last minute, and then you have this thought, I'm guilty, I'm a bad friend, or you feel guilty, I should say, and you have this thought, I'm a bad friend. Or you can imagine what you would do, what would help you wake up and calm down, open the window, make a nice cup of coffee, maybe wear that shirt that you get lots of compliments on. And that would lead to you approaching instead of avoiding the situation. So in this case, we see how, if you were engaging in CBT, for example, you could work on skills to change the default of your behavior in these situations too, and take that approach instead of avoidance strategy. Okay, if you had a seizure while you were out on a walk with your mom and it was unexpected, I have this thought, I can't control myself, I'm so embarrassed, I look like a fool. Or you could think, wow, that came out of the blue, I'm still learning, I'm glad I was with mom then, I'm grateful for the people in my life. Your behavior for the first one might be to go to bed and cry. For the second one, you might wonder if there were triggers from today. It was a stressful morning. Wow, I've had a really rough day. Maybe it's a good day for ice cream. And following the red one, in that initial thought, you might not talk to anyone. You might hide away, blow up at mom when she checks in on you. And if you follow the pattern of the blue, I should see if mom wants to join me. Maybe we can watch that Netflix show together. It's a good day to just take a break. So very different outcomes. I'm just going to, I can send this out afterwards. These are just some different approaches for improving relationships. Letting a family member know that you appreciate their support, talking to a family member or friend about something that's on your mind, going to an event where you'll meet other people, arranging a get together. These are just ways that you could take control over the situation, over improving your relationships. Okay, so we've covered these three areas, which are the main foci, I should say, of CBT, and the most common areas where you would intervene. And this isn't to say, too, that CBT is all about like, oh, just think positively and everything changes. I know just based on these examples alone, that could be kind of the impression that you have, like, oh, that's an unrealistic or just kind of a simple view of the world. But really the idea is to help us think, what are our helpful and unhelpful thoughts and behaviors that we're engaging in? How are those affecting us and affecting our life? Like actually understanding these processes that are taking place and gaining some tools to help manage those thoughts and manage our behaviors. And CBT is one tool that's really powerful for helping us do that. Okay, and there's just this interesting article that you can look up on your own time, but it's an article about how changing the way your mind works can also change your brain itself. And so there's a real reason why CBT has, these positive outcomes on and long-lasting, oftentimes, outcomes on people, because you can actually change your neural wiring through learned behavior. Okay, so we covered beginning of this workshop a brief overview of depression and anxiety, and some just, again, a brief overview of what CBT is and some of the core tools that are used to treat negative thoughts and behaviors that contribute to depression in CBT. There's a whole host of other tools that we like to use as well. And I just wanted to open it up to questions at this point. In here.
I have a question for you. The isolation that we have suffered through during COVID, I know it has influenced a lot the mental health, and it has created a lot of depression. How do we, now that we're going back to being open to the world, how can we take advantage of it? It's like, is there, you think about, oh, let's get together with other people, but in your opinion, how much of that is going to really help to some of the challenges with depression in our society?
Yeah. So your question, Carlos, is like, how much will actually like engaging with other people help your depression? Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it's one that's very understandable, especially if you're experiencing depression. It can feel like really, just talking with someone else is going to make me feel better, or just, or it can also be just really hard to make that first move. I think a lot of it depends on what first is like the main contributor to your depression. If it's something like social isolation, that will, I think, be it will benefit you to make that, to try to increase social support, because in general, social support has been shown to be a buffer against depression and to help people. But I think, again, it can be tough to make that first step. I think oftentimes when people are really struggling with depression, like even getting out of bed can be hard. And so, and if people are able to leverage these resources and, tap into a social network, that's great. But if otherwise, they may need a little more assistance.
One thing I think about a lot is a lot of people suffering from epilepsy, they live in a continuous state of isolation in many ways, because they have transportation issues, or they might have, they don't feel comfortable being around other people, or other people are actually not comfortable with them around, which is because of the stigma and the ignorance around epilepsy. And one of the things, like how much, I do know a lot of people living with epilepsy that they feel that complete isolation, and COVID almost having a solution to them, because they're able to, the world has changed in a way that we are able to connect to other people via Zoom and via virtual wall. Our support groups keep growing and growing. So how much of a, I mean, it's hard to say, but how much of a benefit would be to utilize these technologies to connect with, to kill that isolation, to stop the isolation?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that Zoom and the different forms of, I feel like over the past year for myself personally, I was like connecting with family in other countries more than I have before, just through like, we were using Facebook video calls and just messaging platforms. And I think that it does, like the benefit of technology to help address that social isolation is something that we've really seen over the past couple years in particular. And like you were saying, having these social support groups, people being able to connect, not just like on a local level, but even a national level, that's really powerful and can, give people a really strong sense of community. And so I've seen that personally, and it's definitely beneficial to have that sense of community.
We have a question about if we can have copy of the slides. In Erika, will you be okay to share that with this group of people? So I will make sure I email you everybody that register the PowerPoint. I'll make a PDF of it, and I send it to you guys. There's also another questions. Are there some articles or features that document an epileptic's journey using CBT to manage their behavior and have or show a significant change?
Yes, yeah. So I can send some examples. That book by Patty, here I can put it in the chat.
Well, I mean, this, yeah.
The 4-letter or the other 4-letter word. Let me put that in the chat. If folks haven't read it already, this is high on the recommendation list.
And we have copies of that book. If anybody would like a copy of that book, you can email me and we'll mail your copy. This is my email address. We know Patty very well. She's a very good friend.
Oh, okay, great, yeah. And I can also share some other, I myself am curious if folks want to pop things in the chat too. I think that could be helpful. But otherwise I can send a couple things I came across.
Yeah, I will send those articles via email with the PowerPoint to everybody who registers. So you'll get it in your email. I also want to invite everybody. Our support groups, our adult support groups, have gone from having once a month to 4 months to 8 times a month. So now we're having 2 days a week. We're getting together via Zoom in our adult support group, and you are invited to join us. That sometimes it helps, to open up and fight the isolation. You can visit our website, epilepsynorcal.org, and you'll see there all the support groups that we have scheduled. Let me put it here. There's definitely one thing that COVID has done is like the regional borders are disappearing little by little. We have people from all over the world attending our programs, a lot of children attending our programs. So it's a positive.
Fantastic. Yeah.
There's more and more interest, and we're building a sense of community through our support groups, our virtual support groups. So I would like to invite everybody to join us there twice a week. You can see the information in Epilepsy.
Oh, that's great to hear folks in the chat saying that they're finding it really supportive. Yeah, I think that is just a huge benefit, a huge win to come out of, this virtual shift. I've found a lot of community through online spaces and met people who like I otherwise wouldn't have, connected with during this time.
Yeah, we have our camp for children living with epilepsy, Camp Coelho. We have had it virtually for the last 2 years, and we evolved into a 1 week, virtual to 2 weeks to a whole 3 months of virtual activities with the children. And the kids are actually starting to build friendships outside these kids that they actually have a lot of problems with isolation, with higher level of disability. And now they meet every week. They meet for a few hours over Zoom, and they have their virtual friends, they never met in person. So we're really happy about how this sad time in our lives, COVID actually brought up something positive.
Yeah, I also love that it's expanded across different age groups too.
Yeah. Monica has a question. I'm familiar with CBT, yet after some time, I find it so difficult to reframe my negative thoughts. Any other suggestions?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I think that it's a common one, like it's not easy to just change our thoughts right away, right? And oftentimes, like our thoughts are learned for a reason. I think something in CBT, there are a lot of different tools that we use, but understanding kind of the role that thought is playing, understanding like what emotion it's leading to and what are the specific situations that can prompt the thought can be helpful. if it's something that, if it's a thought that you want to reframe, I say that because I say that you want to reframe because I do think that there are some thoughts, you know, it's very case specific. There are some situations where you don't want to dismiss your emotions or dismiss the thought that you're having. Sometimes something happens, and you know, I was talking with some colleagues about some recent, you know, tragedies over the past couple of years, and those thoughts, you know, you shouldn't necessarily reframe. And so it's really, if you see this connection between the situation, the thought, and your emotions, then it can be helpful to, or the situation, the thought, and your emotion, like you're feeling very negatively about it, it can be helpful to keep a record, I think, keep a record of the times where it's coming up for you, and also keep a record of like the, you know, counter thoughts. It's hard without knowing a little more about the situation, but those are some strategies that I've used when it's been, and that I've seen work effectively for folks. Yeah, but what are some things that I would be curious, like if anyone has engaged the CBT or has you know, tried reframing some of their negative thoughts. I'm curious what they've tried when it's been difficult to do so. We often talk about replacing our negative thoughts in CBT, like if it's a thought that you've identified is unhelpful and causing you distress, then you can think of something just like, as I was saying, like kind of a different way of seeing that. And then it takes practice to replace that negative thought. But I think awareness is the first key. So if you're like kind of tracking throughout the day and recording when it comes up, like I said, oftentimes when we have these negative thoughts, it becomes like a tape recorder, and they play frequently through our minds. Then you can actually like catch them, write them down as they come up, and just becoming aware of them is really helpful, because you can have this thought and you can say, oh, there it is. I think ACT is also really helpful as a tool, because you can have this approach where you say, you know, that's a thought that I'm having, and it's just a thought. It doesn't mean that it's true. It's just a thought. Sometimes, you know, when we have a thought and we start, you know, really internalizing it as fact, we can experience distress. And so I found like just acknowledging that it's a thought, and it'll, you know, pass. It's not a fact is really helpful too. So sorry, those are just a few strategies, like trying to replace it with a counter thought, recording the negative ones so that you're aware when they come up and can replace them, and then having, you know, just recognizing them for what they are. Okay. Oh, and someone said, I have recently started, or sorry, I've been in therapy for a few months, and although the frame around the discussions hasn't been oh, sorry, my screen is cutting off this comment. Although the frame around the discussions hasn't been CET, this is essentially the exercise. I feel this is a great way to describe it. Oh, great. Wonderful. Yeah. There's another thing that I'll mention briefly with CBT that I think is really important and specific to like the uncertainty of seizures that come up with epilepsy. Uncertainty in general can cause a lot of distress. And we all, I think, exist on a spectrum of how comfortable we are with uncertainty. It's very natural for us to be uncertainty, averse if it's something, for example, that's really unpleasant or something that we associate with embarrassment or discomfort. And so we can start to fear the uncertainty itself more than, in this case, maybe more than a seizure itself, is like the fear of when it's going to happen. That can be very anxiety inducing. And as we saw, anxiety and depression closely related. And so CBT is also helpful. It can be helpful for managing or just learning how to become more comfortable with uncertainty. And that's also an ACT principle. ACT is acceptance, commitment, therapy, acceptance. So that can also help people increase their tolerance of those uncertain events and reduce distress that comes with it, right? Yeah, and I actually wanted to, I'll close out with a mindfulness exercise for us that's based in ACT. But if anyone has another question, maybe one more question, we can close with that. And then I can lead us in that exercise. Okay, so an example of using ACT with uncertainty. There's actually this worksheet that I was thinking of that would be great, but I'll try to just pull from it. Say there's a situation that comes up repeatedly and it's causing you distress because you don't know when it's going to happen. You could say like, okay, like this is happening again, and it's a situation that causes me discomfort. I've historically not liked the uncertainty that comes with this event. And I'm going to, point it out here, like it's happening again. I know that I'm capable of handling uncertainty because I've handled it in the past. And so, I'm feeling this nervousness, and that's natural because, uncertainty can be scary, and I know that I'm capable of addressing this, and I have, done it time and time again. So that might be one example, kind of a mantra that someone might learn to replace that negative thought with ACT, like using, yes, you're welcome. And that's something in both ACT and CBT that's really helpful, like referring to your own evidence, your own experiences that have demonstrated, your capability with, you're capable of addressing certain challenges. Okay, yeah. And so I'll lead us in this brief mindfulness activity. Feel free to close your eyes and to turn off your screen. I accidentally unmuted myself. Okay, take a deep breath. And if you're ready, you can find a comfortable position where you feel stable and supported, but also alert and focused. You could close your eyes and take a few deep breaths here. Now let a scene rise before your inner eyes and find that there is a river close by. Maybe it's broad and slow, masses of water moving before you. Or maybe it's lively or narrow or greenish or has rocks in it. Whatever comes to your mind is totally okay. You can take a walk along the riverside to find the spot where you want to settle down and stay for a while. Maybe there's something special there, like a bench or a stone you can sit on. Maybe there are stairs leading down to the water, or something completely different that tells you that this is the right place for you. Now take your time to watch the river flow by and listen to the sound of the steadily moving water. And you might notice that there are leaves that fall from a tree and float on the river. They get carried past the spot where you sit further away until you lose sight of them. The river carries them on. And there's the next leaf that floats past. You follow it with your gaze until you can't see it anymore. Take your time to just imagine watching the leaves as they float past you and out of sight. And if you want to, you can find a thought that is going through your mind right at this moment and tie it to the next leaf that's passing by. Maybe it's a word or sentence that you can imagine written on the leaf, or you can pin it there or put it on a sticky note and stick it to the leaf, or maybe something completely different, whatever seems fitting. And when your thought is connected to the leaf, you can watch it as it keeps floating down the river further and further away until you can't see it anymore. Notice the next thought that's coming to your mind and stick it on a leaf and let it float away. Take a deep breath as you watch it go. And maybe there's more than one thought on your mind, or they come very quickly. Then the river will bring you 2 or 3 more leaves to tie your thoughts to, so you can watch them all float by. Just watch as they're carried away. And maybe your head feels empty and there are no thoughts coming at all, and that's okay too. You don't have to do anything. Just watch the river flowing before you and breathe. If a thought shows up, you can pin it to a leaf. If not, that's okay too. Just patiently take your thoughts, tie them to the leaves, and let them go. It might be the same thought repeatedly. That's no problem. Just take it and tie it to the leaf and watch it pass by like all the other leaves. And when you've had enough of practicing that today, you can thank your river for being there to carry all the leaves and say goodbye to the scenery. You can come here anytime you want to practice letting go of something. Take a moment to sense the room around you. Feel your body in that room. Open your eyes if you haven't already and change your posture a little, maybe after a small stretch. And thank yourself for taking the time to practice letting go today. Okay. Okay, and you can open your eyes when you're ready. Okay, and thank you everyone. That was just brief exercise and recognizing your thoughts. Like I said, that's like the kind of the first step And that's an ACT exercise for accepting them and letting go of them. A lot of times we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to change them.
Well, thank you so much, Erika. That was really wonderful. We really appreciate your time and your advice. And thank you, everybody who participated and watched the webinar with us. We really encourage you to take the initiative to educate and to reach out to programs like these, educational programs. And we congratulate you for doing that. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Erika. And we'll be able, I'll have a recording of the class. So I will be able to share this with the group, and I will follow up with all of you guys with the PowerPoint and some more information. So thank you again. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Erika.
Take care. Thank you, Carlos.